Right. Okay, started. Good evening, everybody. I want to thank you all for coming, both in person and online. Tonight we'll be talking about peace, which is a big topic from the perspective of various faiths. Of course, though its opposite will be on the minds of many of our speakers and attendees. The mass murder of Palestinians in Gaza, the genocide of Palestinians in Gaza. That conflict is portrayed in our mass media as a religious conflict, and there's some small kernel of fact of that, but kernel of truth has gone too far. This story oversimplifies both Palestinians and Israelis. Tonight we have speakers on behalf of the three largest Abrahamic faiths: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. We hope that the messages that they have to share with you about peace will demonstrate that religious divides can be crossed peacefully, and that interfaith communications can be a method of resolving conflict rather than its source. With that, I'll let the speakers briefly introduce themselves, and then we'll move into some framing questions. Of course, the speakers are happy to go whichever way they like with their opening questions. With that, Rabbi David, would you like to start us off, or just to briefly introduce yourself? And
yeah, first of all, thank you so much for including me and inviting me to be here. Really appreciate the opportunity to share with you all. And just thank everyone for coming and joining in. So to introduce myself, I am speaking with you from Hamilton, Ontario, where I live. I'm a retired rabbi. I am an activist. Very relevant to this conversation is, for most of my life, I was a liberal Zionist. And that means I really believed in the importance of a Jewish state. And the liberal part is I thought it should be a just society and there should be equality. I had a lot of nice ideas like that. And I would say in the last 5 years or so, I've realized that it's really based on errors, and I reject that. So I'm an anti-Zionist. I lived in Israel for 4 years. I speak, read, and write Hebrew. I read the Hebrew Israeli media every day. And I've been there many times. So I feel like I have an understanding that's based on personal experience. And I've been involved with this issue, I'd say, for 55 years or more. I think I'll leave it at that for an introduction and look forward to hearing from the other speakers and then, hearing from everyone a bit later.
hello, everyone. My name is Ziad. Assalamu alaikum to everyone who's here. Welcome. And so my name is Ziad. I live in North Bay, work here. I'm also a member of the North Bay Mosque, quite active in terms of leading some of the prayers and other activities. So, yeah.
Hi, my name is Johanna Cristalitis. I am a member of the Christian community, specifically the Anglican Christian community in North Bay. I have grown up with the Anglican Church. My mom is an Anglican minister. So that has always been a part of my life, and with a liberal Christian view in that not assuming that we are the only right way to understand God. So that's sometimes called Christian pluralism because it's keeping open the idea that others, the way others connect with God is equally valid to the way that we do through the teachings of Jesus.
Wonderful. Thank you everybody for coming. So I have one question to start us off, but then I think I'm going to give us a lot of freedom to go whichever way we like after that. And that question is, how does your faith factor into your personal response to conflict? Rabbi, would you start us off there?
You're asking me to start off?
Yeah.
It's a little, I just want to say, a little hard for me to understand you.
Oh, sorry.
If you would speak a little more slowly and enunciate more clearly, I probably could hear you better. But I understood you're asking, how does my faith inform my response to conflict? Is that it?
Correct.
Well, my faith teaches me to respect all people. A foundational article of Jewish faith is that every person is created in God's image. That means that every person is an image of God. And when we encounter someone, we're actually encountering God in human form. And when we have conflict, the best way to approach it is to understand that that other person has as much worth as I do, and to try to understand them, try to relate to them respectfully, really kind of try to appreciate them. So everything I'm saying is, I'd say it's on a kind of an idealistic level. Like that should be my ideal of what I do. I think the question should be really applied to actual conflicts in the real world rather than a kind of abstract value like what I just addressed. And I imagine what's bringing us together here tonight, in a large way, we could say would be something like the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which has been going on for almost 100 years. And in a more specific and narrowly focused way, maybe what we're thinking about is what Israel's doing to Gaza and now to Lebanon. So my response to that, keeping in mind what I just said, but my response to that is sometimes conflicts are between something that is right and good and needs to be supported and cared for by our own solidarity and active engagement with it, and something else that is quite wrong and needs to be opposed and rejected. So in this situation that we're talking about, if we're focused on that specific conflict and not kind of an abstract idea of conflict, I am very motivated by my faith at this time to stand with the Palestinian people and with people everywhere, including many, many, many other Jewish people, and including some Jewish people who live in Israel, in supporting the Palestinian people's struggle for freedom and equality in their own country. I think I'll leave it at that and invite any questions or any further discussion. But I'll just say clearly, my religion teaches me to stand with people struggling for justice. I'll just say a little bit more, just a bit of a kind of a rabbinic teaching about Judaism. A lot of what Judaism teaches us is that what most matters is our actions, our deeds. Judaism is not so concerned about what we believe. or like a doctrine. What we do in this world is what's important. So that leads to the concept of commandments, right? That we can say God or the creator, sustainer, the force, the power that makes this whole world be and brings us into it and keeps us in it, has set up the world in a way that if we behave in certain ways, there's going to be certain kinds of outcomes. So commandments are ways that we need to follow and to behave those ways so that things come out well. And traditionally, the Jewish religion has 613 commandments, not just 10. Many of those will be familiar to you. But the concept with all of them is that we need to do those commandments when the opportunity arises or when the situation is right. Then we need to do those commandments. But out of the 613, there are 2 commandments that use the word pursue. And those 2 are seek peace and pursue it, and justice you shall pursue. So the traditional rabbis, close to 2,000 years ago, recorded in the Talmud, noted that. And they said with all the commandments, of course, you do them when the time comes. When the opportunity arises, you have to do it. But for peace and for justice, you have to pursue it. You have to get up out of your place of comfort, out of your routines, out of all the things that you're just used to, and you have to go out and try to make peace and to bring justice. So that actually informs me, motivates me, and comes to me from my faith tradition. And I'll leave it at that and look forward to hearing from the other speakers. Thank you.
Thank you. That's it. Thank you. I'll start with our prayer, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and it means in the name of Allah, the most loving, compassionate, merciful, and gracious. And the rabbi made mention of God as describing a little bit about God. So I would like to kind of add on to that. When we say Allah, what we really mean is this is the Arabic word that is for God, who is the creator, the eternal. He is the supreme being, as the rabbi also described. Allah says in the Quran, in chapter 49, O humanity, it's addressed to everyone. Indeed, we created you from a male and female and made you into peoples and tribes so that you may get to know each other. That is one verse which is quite well known by the Muslims and perhaps also outside of the Muslim community. This verse tells us that Allah created us different in our personalities, because we are made into different peoples and tribes with different life experiences. But what the last part of this verse emphasizes on is to come together for dialogue, to understand each other. So for that, I'd like to thank all the organizers for bringing us together today to reflect on our faith and how our faith guides us through conflict in this world. In fact, I will talk not just about the world, but about ourselves, conflict within. So I pray that Allah bless us with better understanding of each other. Just to give a brief introduction of our understanding of conflict before I go into the question that you asked, which is, how our faith, factors in comes to conflict.
the nature of creation itself is that of difference. The night and the day. These are mentioned in the Quran. In the differences of the day and the night, the four seasons are very different to each other. To each other, the lakes and rivers, the forests and the deserts, all created by Allah, our Creator, and that is for a purpose. And each, despite their differences, is beautiful in its own way. For example, at night, we can see the northern lights, not in the day. But during the daytime, we can gaze at the blue sky and ponder on the infinite beyond, right? So likewise, when people come together, despite differences, we can strengthen one another and understand each other more. Although we have differences. But those differences also make it possible for conflicts, because we, as human beings, we have weaknesses, right? We have different life experience. We have different states of being. We have different emotions. One can be feeling sad and deal with the situation in one way. One can be tired, hungry. Different states influence our experiences. But our common weakness is that of the ego. In Arabic, we call it nafs. The ego, if it is left uncontrolled, leads to oppression of the self and others possibly also. For Muslims, we have the concept of jihad. Jihad means which is the greatest struggle, is the struggle against the soul. It's not the soul, sorry, the ego rather. Unlike what the news wants to believe that jihad means holy war. No, it means a struggle against the self, against your ego. We don't believe in holy war because war is not holy. And to further elaborate on the topic of conflict, Allah says in the Quran that He created life and death as a test, as a challenge for us to see, as a challenge, who of us are best in doing good deeds, meaning that challenges in life, opportunities for us, there are opportunities for us to see how we respond, how we compete with each other in doing good in various situations. The analogy I would like to give is that of a ship. The ship, if it stays in the harbor all the time, we won't know what it is really worth. Its real worth is assessed in the high seas, right? So likewise, we discover our strengths in times of hardship, in times of conflict. Conflicts happen to also reveal who we are inside. Conflicts, we've seen, for example, in this conflict that is happening now, this genocide rather of what Israel is doing. We've seen people take sides and reveal the true nature of the leadership, especially in the Gulf. We didn't expect them to be such hypocrites. But here it is. We find it reveals, conflicts brings it out. But it is good also because if we can understand our weaknesses, we can also work on it. As long as we are ready to reflect, okay, this is my weakness. But people who do not experience any conflicts may not be able to appreciate peace and justice because they never went through a struggle. So it's not something that they can appreciate. Our response as Muslims to conflicts, it is very simple, actually. It is to respond in the best way, the most pleasing way to Allah, to our Creator. When you think about it, actually, this means that when we are in times of peace and there's no conflict, And when we're in times of conflict, we have the same response. We should strive for what we call as ihsan. Ihsan is an Arabic term which means a perfection or excellence in a way that is pleasing to God. And that brings us closer to our Creator. So in that sense, trials, conflicts are in general blessings in disguise. So I'll give some prophetic traditions on how we deal with the conflicts now. Do I have some time for that? Sure. Okay, thanks. So Allah says in the Quran, وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. Indeed, we have honored the children of Adam. We have human beings are honored or dignified wherever we are and whenever we interact with each other. We cannot take away dignity and humiliate others, no matter what the situation is. So that's the first one to keep in mind when dealing with conflicts. Number two, our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, "Verily, I have not been sent to invoke curses. Rather, I have been sent as a rahmah." Rahmah means some people translate it as mercy, but it's actually more than that. It's a compassion, actually, to the whole world. So following his way, we are expected to be a nation of rahmah to all human beings. And I could give some examples, perhaps later on in this. The third one I would like to share with you is patience. The Quran tells us, "Ista'inu bis-sabri was-salah." Seek help in patience and in prayer, in connecting with God. Patience does not mean to be passive and let things happen. It is to act in a way which is beautiful, which is pleasing to Allah. Number four is to speak well to people. The Quran tells us, وَقُولُوا لِلنَّاسِ حُسْنًا. Speak well, speak good to people, no matter what the situation is. The Prophet said regarding that, say what is good or stay silent if we don't have anything good to say. Number five, God tells us in the Quran, وَلَا يَسْتَوِي الْحَسَنَةُ وَلَا السَّيِّئَةُ ادْفَعْ بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ. I translate as a good action and a bad action are not equal. Repel what is bad with something which is good, in fact, which is better. And this, I want to just quote from Shakespeare. He said, the expression, to kill people with kindness. That's what it means here. But that shouldn't be confused with pacifism. Muslims are not pacifists. We have the right to defend ourselves, our lives, properties. And last one that perhaps I'd like to share is, we have to know in the prophetic tradition when to disengage in conflict, when to turn away and say words of peace. In the Quran, Allah says, the servants of the most merciful, most compassionate are those who walk upon earth humbly. And when the ignorant people address them, they say words of peace, meaning they weigh their words and don't just get carried away and go to the level of ignorant people. So to end, in the process of seeking peace in the face of conflicts, we cannot forget about justice also. Peace is not really peace without justice. Martin Luther King actually said in one.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, just pausing for.
Martin Luther King actually said in one famous sermon of his in 1956 that when peace becomes obnoxious is when there's no justice and evil is given reign, right? And that is, it has a context to it when he said that. So I'll end with this verse in the Quran. Allah says, God commands justice and to strive for excellence, ihsan, and to be generous towards relative. And he forbids what is shameful, unjust, and oppressive. God teaches us so that we may take heed. Thank you very much.
All right, Joanna, you want to,
Yeah. Thank you both for sharing more details of what your faith say about conflict and peacekeeping. A big part of what I wanted to talk about was is in relation to, I think, the most well-known sort of almost cliche of Christianity in terms of conflict, which is to turn the other cheek. And that response to conflict is greatly misunderstood as being something passive. So I was in speaking with my mom about this, because I knew she would have more other sources to pull from that would help me say what I wanted to say, because I really wanted to address this idea that if somebody has conflict, we just sort of step back and let them do whatever. That this idea of forgiveness is the same as permission, or turning the other cheek is asking to be hit, and that's not what that is. So when the saying is that if somebody slaps you on your right cheek, you turn and offer them your left. If someone is hitting you on the right cheek, so just picture them. If somebody's hitting your right cheek, they're not punching you. If they punch you, that means that their right hand is going to hit your left cheek. And they would have used their right hand. So if somebody is hitting you on your right cheek, that means they're back slapping you, which is something that that would have been more with a power dynamic. So if you were to do that, whether you have someone who is in authority over you, or in an oppressive position over you, or a peer who is basically out of line by doing that, by turning and offering them the other cheek, you're taking that power away from that action, so that it is, you're saying, you're trying to humiliate me and I won't let you. You're trying to oppress me and I won't back down. Without striking back, the action of it's non-violent, but it is very strongly so. Not non-violent in a passive sense, but non-violent in an active standing. And so I think that informs my approach to conflict, because it is about standing, it's remaining standing when people try to push against you. And but not lowering yourself to their level. So we see this when we've been out, and there are people that perhaps don't agree with us or something that is on our side, and they yell something unkind, and we just say, have a great day. We're promoting peace. We hope you find it. So if somebody is going to be angry towards me, I do my best. And it is difficult if somebody I don't agree with, or if someone is, we're human, so we do react with, there's that fight or flight instinct as well. So part of reflecting on faith teachings to me is to sort of check that fight or flight response and be more thoughtful in my response, but especially not to just allow anything to happen. Forgiveness is not about permission, and standing up to conflict doesn't necessarily mean engaging by hitting back with the same force, but it's also not submitting to other people's attempt to control. So the other part of that is, if you have a conflict with someone else, you have an obligation to address it with them. So so it's actually the Gospel of Matthew has, I think, is the best version if you're going to read any one of the Gospels. Matthew has a lot of good parables and other ways that things are explained. And one of the things that I go to often for conflict, that after reading this, I really try to keep it in practice, which is in Matthew 18, where Jesus talks about if you have a conflict with someone, if your brother or sister sins against you, go and correct them when you are alone together. If they listen to you, you've won them over, and they won them back to the community, basically. But if they won't listen, take with you one or two others, so that every word may be established by the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses. If they still won't pay attention, then report it to the community. So I think too often when we have conflict with somebody, we, in an interpersonal way, we might talk to somebody else about it. So I might say, oh, Diane, I have this issue with William. But that is against the teachings. The teachings are that I should just one-on-one try to address that conflict and try to reconcile it. And also in Matthew, it talks about not making an offering to God when you have animosity in your heart towards someone else. That first you must go and reconcile that conflict before offering your prayer and your offering to God. So that is, if you can't always reconcile because you're only in control of yourself, but you are looking after, I know I have this conflict, I'm not going to stay quiet about it. I'm going to seek resolution, not seek to inflame the conflict, but to seek resolution to the conflict so that we can move forward together. So that, I think, is part of what gets misunderstood sometimes, that as though it's more permissive. And then there's also just, I generally have conflict with some of the ways that Christianity is misunderstood because of the way some people practice it that I don't particularly agree with, because I don't, that's not what Jesus said. So when people are passing judgment on someone, or people are taking sides with one group over another, or at any time not standing with the oppressed and the vulnerable and standing up against injustice, if you are not doing that, you are not living your faith. Your faith is that you stand up for those who need someone beside them. You stand up against oppression, you stand up against injustice, and you call it out. And you make sure that it's addressed so that it can be reconciled and people can move forward together. And yeah, so currently there are a lot of Christian voices that are putting forward ideas that I don't believe are very Christian. And I was talking to someone about, like, how can we resolve that conflict within our church, in the wider church sense? And that's difficult because we also are taught not to make a show of things, so that, like, if something can be resolved in private, it can be resolved in private. If you do something that's a good work, you don't then tell everybody about the good that you did. So sometimes people, I think, are confusing not making a show of good work and not making a show of prayer with not making a show of standing against injustice. And we do need to make a show of that so that people who are in an oppressive position or who are siding with the oppressors see that there are people fighting against injustice and fighting oppression. So that we do need to make a show of, and we need those voices to be louder. And that is in line with what I've learned growing up with the Christian faith.
Thank you, Joanna. I think I am probably of the mind, at least some of our speakers, to take a more sort of material approach to the night, in the sense that we should concern ourselves with the conflict in front of us. Some of the questions I prepared were, you could say, idealist. And so I'm gonna put one more question to the panel, I would say, and then I'll open the floor to questions. All right. So my last question is, how do you see yourself in relation to the conflict in Israel and Palestine, and what have you been doing in relation to the conflict? Better? Okay. And I'll start with Rabbi again. So did that question come through?
I heard you. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm probably defaulted to quick again.
So how I see myself in relationship to this particular conflict going on right now. I am very, very involved in trying to help in ways that I can. It's agonizing, it's heartbreaking. I'm like obsessed with it. And every day I spend time trying to help. And you asked, what are we doing? So in the beginning, around early October last year, I was very active politically and publicly in protest demonstrations. I went to Washington, D.C. as a rabbi who's an American living in Canada. And along with about 350 others, I was arrested in the US Capitol. That made news all over the world. It was like every media outlet that there is. That was October 18th last year. Jews calling for ceasefire. I've spoken at rallies and demonstrations, literally with 10,000 people. I marched in the streets like week after week after week. And I would say by the end of November, I realized that this wasn't really having much impact at all. And we needed to do something different. And I'll just include in what has not had impact is writing many, many, many emails to MPs and to ministers in the government, signing dozens of petitions, doing so many political things, along with thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of people here in Canada and millions of people around the world. So I continue to do. I'm spending time now planning it. Yesterday morning, I got up at 3:45 in the morning and I was out the door by 4:15 in the morning. So I could meet with dozens of other activists at 5 in the morning. So we could block the entrances to a weapons manufacturer in Oakville and delay the workers from going in to make the weapons parts that they ship to Israel. I continue to do those things, but I still feel like very impotent. We do what we can do. We don't know when it will ever tip the balance or have some impact. And I think it's kind of an article of faith to try to be strategic, try to think what can have an impact, try to do it. But what I want to talk about more than that is I have, for some years now, been providing direct aid and support to a number of families in Gaza. There are people in Gaza who started writing to me a few years ago and developed a relationship. And then they started asking me for help. This was years ago. They couldn't feed their children. They couldn't buy medicine. They couldn't buy clothes. And I started fundraising for them. During the last year, that has like exploded. So I've organized dozens of people outside of Gaza to regularly raise funds and give money to several dozen families inside Gaza. And besides that critically needed financial support that they use to, just like I said, to buy food, to buy water, the last month or two, to buy warm clothes, to get tents, to pay for medical care if they need it. Besides that, we are just in relationship with them. We're offering them care and witnessing what they're going through. They can write to us like every day and tell us what they're experiencing, and we just respond with like empathy and acknowledging. And they know that somebody somewhere outside of the extreme situation that they're in, somebody is paying attention to them. And that for me has been very rewarding. Every day I feel like I'm accomplishing something. If I can raise $100 or $200 and send it to like a young woman in her 20s with 3 children whose husband's been taken away from her, and she's in a tent that she has only because we sent her money to buy a tent. And she can take that $100 or $200 and buy some food for her kids. And I feel like I accomplished something. So I'll just wrap that up really quickly. I'm doing a lot politically. Even just being here tonight and talking with you is part of that. And then the other thing is trying to tangibly, concretely make a difference in some people's immediate reality. So that's it. Thank you.
When it comes to the Israel and Palestine situation, it's not a conflict. I mean, it's beyond conflict. It's beyond what they're doing is beyond humanity. Those who are able to, shoot at a car with a family and kill everyone except for the youngest 6-year-old who was able to call an ambulance. The ambulance came, they killed the paramedics, and then they ended up with killing the 6-year-old. We don't know if that the family was Muslim, Jew, well, probably not Jewish, but could be, or Christian. Because before Zionism, the people lived together without any conflict. Before 100 years ago, until those Zionists became religious. So, in terms of how I feel, I mean, I don't know what I cannot even express because it's too much. It's nothing that can be expressed in words. And I leave it to God. So what I do is first and foremost, I pray for them. God has a plan, and I believe in it. We have a verse in the Quran that says, "La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah." There's no movement, and there's no power that can happen except by the will of God. So those people who are being tested there are undoubtedly the strongest people God wants us to know about them. And in fact, our prophet prophesies that the situation will come to that. And he said the truth will be with those people. You know, the Muslims at that time, at this time we're living in, the truth will be with them. But if, you know, we can all contemplate what that means, but this is the situation we are in now. We live, you know, North America is a bubble. You know, the whole world knows what's happening and understands who the oppressor is clearly, but the government here, whether it's opposition or the one in power, the states, we just like block it because there's a strong lobby, whatever the reason is. I mean, I've done some protests here and there, but as Rabbi David said, you know, it doesn't do much really. It doesn't do much because people are bombarded by brainwashing news. So what can we do? Right? So people will counter it with fake information, like, you know, what happened with the October 7th. Biden went on TV and said, you know, I saw the heads of however many babies. And then it was later proven that this is not factual at all. It was all made up. If the head of the country, the leader of the country can come and say fake things like that, then the oppressors, you know, I leave it to God. Pray to God, to our Creator. He knows, and He will free them because we believe in the with hardship comes ease. When it's gonna be, no matter what it happens, the people there have won already. They have God's mercy on them. Just because they're suffering, you know, the prophets who came before us, they suffered also. No? In fact, the strongest in faith are those who suffer. So that is why perhaps the prophet, our prophet Muhammad said, truth is with them, because they are suffering so much. I cannot even bear to see. How can I imagine being there? Right? Children, women, all people. So I don't know, to be honest. You know, Palestine, Jerusalem, we call Beit Maqdis, is in my heart. I am Palestinian in that sense, although I'm not original ethnically, you know, from there, but in my heart I am with them every moment of the day. But you know, perhaps we can hear from other views, but I honestly don't see, except as God wills, what we can do.
So related to what you were saying, I think of I often think of some of what are called the Beatitudes. Blessed be the peacemakers, for they are the children of God. But most especially the final one in that series from the Sermon on the Mount, which is, blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you and say all manner of evil against you falsely. And that is the scripture that comes to mind so much when looking at the way that this is positioned in the media to make it look like the victims are the oppressors and the oppressors are the victims. That is such falsehood that's the verse that comes to mind, that like you were saying, that is the strength and God's blessing is with those that struggle. but it still breaks my heart to see people having to go through that struggle. And people often put forward this idea of Jesus never doing anything and just being, you know, very lovey-lovey. But he also flipped the table in the temple and drove out the money launderers who were cheating the people and were bringing oppression and injustice and commodification of a religious place. And so I think how that informs for me how I would, you know, I can't stay silent in this because my faith demands that I speak up for people in or try to amplify their voices more than speak with mine, because I am at arm's length from all of this, but I feel that I need to do something, and it needs to be something that pushes back against that status quo, because that, to me, that's the story of Jesus flipping the tables, is that this is how things had been going for a long time. This method of commerce within the temple was how things had been running. And he came in and said, this is not how this should be. And even if they set up the same way the next day, you know, we don't have the story of, you know, 1 week later in the same temple. But it's about challenging the way things are being run when they are not being run fairly. And the situation in Palestine hasn't been fair for a very, very long time. And I wish that I had done more sooner, but at the point where it, you know, for the last over a year, this is a genocide, and it bothers me to see people not doing something. Even if one day all I can do is share a post to my stories or have a conversation with someone. I have a very small circle of influence, but that doesn't mean I shouldn't try to do something. So it's even in the little things, even just wearing my keffiyeh everywhere I go. And I haven't had a lot of people, but every once in a while there's someone that just sort of says, you know, I see that, that's cool. I see your support. I saw somebody had pins that were, I forget what it was exactly, but it was related to Palestine, and I said, I like your pin. And she said, thank you for noticing. So it's even little things like that, because this is going to be a long fight, and we need to continue to work together and support each other in any way that we can, even if it seems small, because I can really feel that for many people, sort of losing steam, particularly for people like me, little white North American girls. It's, you know, this is important, and we can't just let it drop because it's old news or it doesn't seem to be having an effect. If this isn't having an effect, what else can we do? How can we keep flipping the table? Every time they set them up again, how can we flip this table too? I don't have answers on how that can happen. It's just to never give up on continuing to take action and hope that it will make a difference, whether for one person or to a larger group. Yeah. Thanks.
I'll give you folks some choice in how this should go, but my instinct is to open the floor to questions. Does that sound good to everybody? All right. Does anyone have anything they would like to ask to our speakers? Oh, and maybe go a bit closer to the mic.
Hi, everyone. I just have a question for Rabbi David. First, I would like to thank everyone for coming and making this happen.
and for the panelists to be here. And I appreciate the help that you're giving to the Palestinians as much as you can. My question is related to your introduction to yourself. I wanted to know the reason of why you shifted your perspective from being a Zionist to being an anti-Zionist, or what made it happen? What was the catalyst?
Great, thank you. So here the question is, what made me shift from being a Zionist to being an anti-Zionist?
That's correct.
And I have to say it was a very, very long process. More than 40 years, maybe 50 years of seeing the reality of what's going on the ground there, and reading and learning, and also, I think, meeting and talking with Palestinians. But I really want to emphasize it was a very slow, long, gradual process. I'll say more about the specifics later, but something I think that we should all learn from what I just said is that people can change. People that have like convictions or commitments to certain ideas can reevaluate and can come to different conclusions and end up in a different place. So I know it's very frustrating and sometimes feels impossible to discuss things with people that have strong commitment to Zionist ideas. You need to use your judgment about that. Sometimes it is a complete waste of time and you shouldn't bother doing it. But sometimes, even though they're arguing with you, I think if they're listening to you at the same time, maybe arguing back, it's worth staying in the conversation because you might influence them. They're probably never going to say like, oh, now I get it. You're right. And I've been wrong all this time. You'll never have the satisfaction of hearing that. But you don't know like what's going on inside their head while you're talking with them. And maybe a week later or a year later, they might change their mind. And like I said, it took me maybe 40 years. Another factor I'd like to point out is something that I call cognitive dissonance, which means when you see or even know two things that are contradicting each other. It's pretty normal human psychology to not be able to hold both of those in your mind at the same time. It's cognitive dissonance. So your mind kind of shuts one of them down and doesn't allow you to think about that or believe it. So for me, I really believed in the goodness of the Jewish people and the ideals and the vision of Judaism and the rightness that there should be a Jewish country in Israel, or we can call it Palestine. I believe that so strongly, even though I saw right before my own eyes, over and over and over, clear physical evidence of complete mistreatment and oppression and dispossession of Palestinians. I didn't integrate that into my thinking. I saw it, I knew it was true, but I had a kind of a belief system that I had such an emotional attachment to that I didn't like change that. It took years and years and years. And some of the things that really shifted my position, I'll just say one that I recommend to everybody is reading the book, The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine by an Israeli history professor named Ilan Pappé. When I read that book, it like blew me away. It refuted so much of what I had believed up until then. I couldn't maintain those beliefs anymore. I had to reevaluate it. Another book that I read after that was called State of Terror by a writer named Thomas Suarez. And that also just like I had to rethink things. I could go on about this more, but a simple answer to your question is I learned more. I was able to overcome the kind of emotional blockage against admitting into my consciousness what I knew, and after a while, I guess my fundamental desire to be a good moral person in the world, pushed me to change my position. Another thing I have to say is that the community that I've been a part of as a Jewish person, as a rabbi, as someone who's really lived like my whole life in the Jewish world, made it very difficult for me to change my position and to say out loud in public, I'm an anti-Zionist. That means I'm against the state of Israel. There should not be a Jewish state. That's wrong. For me to say that means I lost relationships. I'm outside of the community that I basically lived my whole life in. I've found other relationships and other communities that share that understanding and that kind of moral position. But it was very, very difficult to jeopardize those relationships that have been so important to me throughout my life. Yeah. So I hope that gave you some answer to your question. And yeah, I could talk about it more if anybody's interested, but I recommend those books. And I also recommend remembering that people can change. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd just like to jump in with something relating to what you said about that people can change. Part of looking over some of the sections of Matthew I did before this, there was I'll just read it, that's easier. So you have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy, but what I say to you is love your enemy and pray for those who persecute you, so that you will be acting as children of God. And so part of that is believing that people can change. If you focus on the disagreement, not that you avoid talking about the disagreement, but I think part of the rhetoric is that demonization of the other side. People that disagree with us are horrible, evil people. And with some of the things that happen, it's hard to understand that as anything other than evil. But there are some people that can change their minds. And in order for us to believe they can change their mind, we need to remember that they are also human. They are human like us. They are in the image of God like us. And so we need to love them and pray for them. That we don't need to like them. Loving someone is not the same as liking. We have, what I was taught is that we have to love everybody. We do not hate other people. We don't have to like them. We don't have to spend time with them if there is that toxicity. But to believe they can change requires love and remembering that we are all in God's image. I just wanted to add that. Thanks.
One quick thing to add. On top of the books that were mentioned, there's also, I believe, Rashid Khalili. He wrote 100 Years of War on Palestine. It's another good book. I believe his great or something like that was a mayor, and he wrote to Theodore Herzl, when the first militias started forming around the Zionists. He compiled documents from that army.
Any other question?
I do. My question is to all three representatives. What makes you think that people who are not very religious, um, yet they hold strong political opinions that they somehow derive from religion, they end up becoming the representative of their particular religion? How do we counter that? So, for example, white supremacists, there are groups in communities and Zionists for each group. Yeah, that's the question.
So, if you don't mind, I'll jump in to start because I think,
The question would be,
oh, okay, yeah, so the question was, how can we counter when people are using, if I'm understanding correctly, how can we counter when people are using religion in a way that sort of pushes a power dynamic that isn't actually in line with that religious belief? So so that's, there's a lot of, saying that this is representative of, I know for North American politics, there is a lot of saying that this is the Christian worldview and taking a political ideology and calling it Christian when it is not necessarily, and certainly not universally, how Christians would feel about those issues. Seeing some of the American presidential race brought a lot of that very strongly to light when, you know, there were calls to Christians to come out to vote to support ideas that I don't understand as part of Christianity. And so I think the only way to counter that is through continued dialogue. And that's sort of what I was speaking to earlier about, even though part of the teachings that I've learned is to not make a show of your religion, and this to me is an exception, is that if someone is presenting your religion in a way that is other than the way you understand it, if someone is what I would say is misrepresenting my faith, that I have a duty to speak up and say, no, this is what I understand as the teachings from my faith. And I can't speak to how that other person has interpreted it that way. I don't know where they got that from. But, you know, like I keep in my pocket all of what Jesus said about abortion and LGBTQ issues. He doesn't talk about that. So it's like those kinds of things, or siding with a particular power structure that is not in the faith as I have learned it. And so to counter that what I believe is a misrepresentation, I have to keep speaking about it. So I can't hide that if I just pretend, well, I'm not a Christian because people misunderstand Christians. And if I say I'm a Christian, someone's gonna think that I'm against this and against that. I'm trying to pass judgment and, well, like, you know, I want them to believe in Jesus too. That's between you and God. That's not my place. And so I need to be confident enough in my understanding of my faith to proclaim my faith in saying that this is my faith. I consider myself a Christian, and I can, if you'd like, I can tell you what that means to me. But I definitely want to tell you it doesn't mean what that guy is saying.
Who wants to go next? I think you've been volunteered, right, David?
I'm sorry, were you asking me? It's a little, you know, I'm remote. It's a little hard to.
Oh, sorry. Do you have an answer to that question?
About how to like defend the true teachings of religion? Is that?
Well, against well, against people who are using it inappropriately.
I don't have any like obvious wisdom on that. I think we just need to speak out. That's what I am the only rabbi in all of Canada who says anything critical about Israel. But I have to defend that. I have to put it out there, right? I have to be clear about the not only distinction but even contradiction between Zionism and Judaism. So I'm just saying I don't know if I can succeed because there's only one of me, right? And the money is on the other side, the control of the media is on the other side, but keep doing what we can do. My answer.
I guess, so just to understand the question properly, so what you're saying is the non-religious people somehow have gained power and are speaking on behalf of the religions, right? I think from what I see, let's take ISIS for example, Iraq. It doesn't represent Muslims at all. It's like a very tiny, like nothing, I would say, compared to the vast majority of Muslims, and their agenda is not even about religion, they're just using the religion. They are all about grabbing land, which is no different than Zionists, what they're doing. In fact, ISIS are killing more Muslims, right, than anybody else. So I don't think it's about religion. And you mentioned the KKK. I don't think they represent. I'm sure they don't represent Christianity because they're a small group and they have nothing to do. Their actions are not Christian. And likewise for Zionists. Zionists, a lot of them have been or are atheists. So I don't think they represent Judaism at all. So I don't think that their words are worth anything except what some powers, dark powers behind are giving them. Like the media, for example, they are being given more, and as Joanna said, when we're being misrepresented, we have to speak out. And the imams all around the world have spoken against extremism of this group and other groups here and there. But somehow the people in power are not interested in listening to the people who are the overwhelming majority of my faith. They somehow focus their cameras on those random I don't know what to call them, whatever they are. So I don't know how they gain that power. And maybe they are working for some other agents, to be honest. So
Herzl, for example, was an atheist, you mentioned earlier.
yeah.
And
There are also a lot of Christian Zionists, and that's a scary rabbit hole to go down.
But I was thinking about that at some point. And it's strange to think that they are supporting the Zionists because they want Jesus to end them. Isn't that how it goes?
Yeah, they're using violence to bring back the Prince of Peace, so it's really like, it does not make any sense at all. So, yeah, one of many things I don't understand about about that viewpoint. I don't think Jesus is very happy with the situation.
And cross my mind that this tenure that we don't need to look south of the border for examples of religion being misused. I grew up in Western Canada, and there were many examples of what I would call religious zealots, more or less forming political parties to run for government, and sometimes they succeeded. I've been around some of those governments. For instance, worked for the government of Colombia for a while, when they had 4 cabinet ministers running the government, more or less as a little group office within the government, and they were all ministers from, I would say, fundamentalist churches, and they made political policy based on their understanding or their idea of what Christianity is or was. So, a little flow there. There was a group in France that used to talk about how they work in and for the state, in and against the state. I think that was an actual book that was by that title, in and against the state. People who were employees of the state that worked against it in the evenings and the weekend. We try to do that too for that.
Yeah, there's definitely religious extremism that comes into play in governments in Canada as well. And I mean, and every once in a while, there are people that do some good politically through that faith as well. The NDP was founded by people with a Christian perspective of social democracy and to provide that care. So that I think that's interesting. It also, I find it very funny when churches are like, we are a fundamental church. I'm like, I don't know what you consider fundamental, but there's a lot of judgment that is not, the foundation should not be judging others. That's not what it does. So I just find the term fundamentalist church to be, I don't know what they consider fundamental or where they're getting it. Probably listening to Paul more than Jesus. I disagree with a lot of Paul.
Rabbi David, last question. Will it be taken for the next year?
That's a great idea.
Yeah. Go for it.
Sure.
Yes.
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 Yes to the QR code. Yes.
Okay, so I spoke earlier about raising money and helping people in Gaza very directly. I could say more about how we do that, how they get it. But if anyone listening would like to make a donation, let's see if this works. I don't, you may be able to capture this or use it. And tell me when to put it down. Also, tell me if it works. If anybody's trying to do it, does it work?
It works.
Cool. And then another mechanism for donating besides this GoFundMe, which takes 3% fee, would be simply send me some money by e-transfer at my email address and tell me that's what it's for. You're not just sending me some money because you love me, but it's for other people. So I'll say my email address, and then I'll repeat it. And anybody that wants to do this, I'll pass every penny to people in Gaza. And if you're interested in being involved in connecting with them and relating to them and giving them the kind of emotional support that I talked about, also write to me, and I'll be very happy to kind of join you into that project. So here comes my email address. It's my name. So it's David@Mivasair.com. David@Mivasair.com. And my name's on the screen. You can just copy it. You can also ask Ken, because he got in touch with me. And that is one very concrete, tangible thing that we can do that makes a difference to somebody.
We'll make sure
You know
that,
what? I want to say a little bit more. What really inspired me to do that is knowing Holocaust survivors who were able to survive because somebody helped them. And I thought to myself, it took years to stop the Nazis, the Nazi war machine. It took years of massive armies fighting against them to make it stop. But all during that time, there were individual people and communities. I want to say there were Christian communities, there were, nuns in monasteries, there were Muslim communities in the Balkans and in North Africa that helped Jewish people. There were many, many individuals, walking past a ghetto or something. They could just throw a loaf of bread over the wall or drop off a stack of potatoes someplace where they knew somebody would pick it up, I'm saying that I know people who managed to survive when their families were wiped out, because somebody did that for them. And I thought I can do that for some people in Gaza, even though I'm so far away. But I can, together with a lot of other people. And I feel like that's what we are doing. We have not been able to stop the problem, but we can alleviate some of the suffering of some of the people and possibly even help them survive.
we'll share with the event on Facebook, and however else the event has been sent out after the event. Thank you, Rabbi David, and GoFundMe and your offer are very helpful. Are there any other questions? Might be about time to start wrapping up anyways. So I'd like to have everybody thank all of our presenters here today. I think this has been an enlightening conversation.
Thank the organizers who put it all together and everybody that came to participate.
Yeah, thank you very much for coming. And just on that kind of note, so little plug for what we're doing next. In 2 weeks from today, we'll be here again talking about the VDS movement. So heading into, for some people it's holiday shopping, but also just in general, this is a small concrete thing that we can do all the time, is use our spending power in wise ways, which includes what not to spend money on, but we'll also have a little bit about organizations or individuals that buying from them directly support people in Palestine. So, we'll have that information for you here in 2 weeks, and we look forward to seeing some of you again, maybe. Same time, same place.
Maybe it's worthwhile.